I guess we'll start, and then when the poison control people come, we can add them to the group because I think they want to have some words to say at the end of this. But I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come out today. I'm especially pleased to have be joined here with several local officials. We have the Sheriff, Rule Todd. We have the Chairman of the County Legislature, Kevin Gardner. We have our District Attorney here, Greg Oakes. We have Teresa Wilson and her family here that she's going to speak a little later on. Appreciate her being here. And we have those in the medical profession and some other advocates that are going to speak here today. And we're here obviously to speak on a very important topic that's affecting our communities, and that's synthetic drugs. I was first approached on this issue about a year or so ago. I think when the sales of synthetic drugs were probably at their high point. At that time, I had heard from law enforcement, public health officials, and families who had been victimized by these drugs, asking whether there was anything the state could do to outlaw their sale. And what's particularly tragic about these synthetic drugs is that the makers and sellers of these drugs preyed on our youth by portraying their products as legal alternatives to the street drug counterparts. They also took advantage of how the state and federal government banned the substance, which was by their chemical composition. Every time the state and federal government banned the chemical formula, manufacturers bypassed that ban by simply swapping out the chemicals. And a good example of this was back in 2011. The state actually enacted a ban on the possession of MDPV and methadone, which were two of the compounds that are made up of those bath salts. And then the manufacturers just reformulated their products, and the bath salts will continue to be sold. Last year, at the state level, we did up the ante a little bit with our battle against synthetic drugs. I was pleased, particularly that the governor and the state health department, through executive order, banned the sale and distribution of synthetic marijuana, and then later in that year, made it illegal to possess bath salts and other synthetic drugs. I was also pleased on the local level that last year, under the leadership of people like Kevin Gardner and others, the county passed a local law that prohibited the sale and possession of synthetic drugs within Oswego County. The federal government has also gotten in on the act, fortunately. And last year, the federal government passed the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act, which produced a nationwide federal ban on many of the synthetic drugs, including synthetic marijuana and some of the more popular bath salt compounds. So I think the good news is we're really making effort, we're making headway. And the synthetic drugs trade has really slowed over the last year. But because this is such a moving target and because the danger is so great, we simply can't rest on our laurels. And that's why I'm pleased to introduce comprehensive legislation along with Senator Ritchie, who's sponsoring in the Senate, and my colleague Bob Oakes, who also represents part of Oswego County, is also a co-sponsor on this bill. And I think the legislation is drafted in such a manner that once we get it passed, it's going to have an immediate impact, but also the way it's drafted, I think there's some clever ways that we've drafted this bill that's going to have good impact for the future, so these manufacturers can't just keep changing their compounds and all of a sudden have these synthetic drugs become legal again. And I think, there's a number of ways we attack this problem in this legislation, but the two that I really want to discuss here quickly are, one is the mislabeling. And we picked up this idea, actually Teresa came through with this, which they've done in Illinois. A lot of the people that are selling these drugs sell them as saying they're the legal equivalent of what's on the street drugs. And that's obviously, and they're also selling them as being safe drugs. And the problem with that, obviously, is mislabeling. So we're giving the Attorney General, State Attorney General, more weapons in his arrow holder to be able to go after this mislabelization of what they've done in these drugs. We also did one other thing, and that's giving the Commissioner of Health the ability to put whatever the compounds are on the drug list that's not allowed. So this will give him the freedom as they change these compounds. He's going to be able to take these compounds as it regards to synthetic marijuana and in regards to bath salts. He's going to change those and put them on the list of banned drugs in New York State. I think that's another creative way. If we try to do this every time through legislation, it would take forever. As you see, we've only passed one ban on this, and that was back in 2011. To get legislation passed takes a long time. So I think this will give the Commissioner of Health the ability to change those. Those are the two most important things. The things that I want to say, a lot of people say, well, is synthetic drugs really a problem that much anymore? They continue to be a problem, and they're going to continue to be a problem unless we get a approach, which I think this legislation does, that's going to be able to change with the way things go in the future to make sure that we continue to keep these dangerous substances away from the people off our streets. So those are the 2 points I want to make. I'll be happy to take questions and talk about the other provisions we have in this bill, but we have a lot of people that want to speak today. As I mentioned, Patty Ritchie is the sponsor in the Senate. She was going to be here today, but she had a death in her family, so unfortunately she can't be here, but otherwise she'd be here. I know she'd be happy to answer any questions about the process or what it's going to take to get done in the Senate. First off, I'd like to introduce our DA. Greg Oakes has done a wonderful job prosecuting some of the cases against these synthetic drugs, and I'd like to say a few words. Love to have it.
Thank you very much, Will. First and foremost, I would like to thank Assemblyman Barkley, Senator Ritchie, for their comprehensive and quick approach to this issue. Too many times we find legislators who are unresponsive to the needs of local governments, but in this case we have a friend, Assemblyman Barkley in Senator Ritchie's office. Right after we started seeing the epidemic last year, the bath salts, there was communications between Assemblyman Barkley's office and my office, the Sheriff's Department, asking what they could do to help us and to assist us at the local level, to give us more weapons in our arsenal to fight these criminal acts that are resulting. Unfortunately, as district attorney, I also serve as county coroner here in Oswego County. Last year, unfortunately, we saw way too many events where young men and women were putting their lives at risk, and unfortunately, in some cases, did lose their lives as a result of the synthetic drugs that are being peddled to our kids as a legal and safe alternative to street drugs. This legislation recognizes the real truth. These synthetic drugs are poison, that they are just as dangerous, and if not, sometimes more dangerous than heroin, cocaine, or crack cocaine. Because at least with those substances that we've traditionally thought of as legal drugs, we know what the effects are going to be. Medical workers know how to address those. In many cases, we're finding people that are using synthetic drugs were responding to ERs with high fevers and exhibiting symptoms that the medical personnel just didn't know how to treat or didn't know how to recognize. Again, this legislation helps label those drugs for exactly what they are, poison. And again, I commend the Assemblyman, Senator Ritchie, for the inventive way they approach this legislation by giving the Commissioner of Public Health flexibility to amend the public health law to include new drugs in the controlled substances list. It's just as the Assemblyman said, methadone and MDPV were the original bath salts. So state legislation was passed to address that. And no sooner was it on the books than the chemists in the labs changed the formula, staying one step ahead of us. This legislation gives us that flexibility so we can stay one step ahead of those chemists to help protect our kids, to help protect our communities. Will, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Also, we have someone else who is on the front line of fighting these synthetic drugs in Oswego County. I'd like to introduce the Sheriff, Rule Todd. I also want to mention the Undersheriff, Gene Sullivan, is here too, and acknowledge his presence.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Sheriff.
And again, I want to thank Senator Ritchie and Assemblyman Barkley and Assemblyman Oakes for their immediate help in our stand against these illegal drugs last year. We need to absolutely keep pushing on this type of legislation. We need to protect. That's my job, is to protect the young and the old of this community. And in doing so, the way that we have to do this is to take these illegal drugs that are on the street, that the people who are pushing these and the ingredients that they put into them have absolutely no care about the damage that it does, the reaction to the people that are taking these drugs. They're extremely dangerous with the chemicals that they put into them because they're not regulated. The Wilson family here, I just thank them tremendously. We need to stop the loss of our young and old. They've lost a loved one. I've had road patrol people and I've had correction officers that were hurt by people that were the use of this illegal drugs. And the only way that we can stop this loss is by legislation, because these people have shown the ability to just, like we say, keep changing the substances and to continue to push this to our young and old, all for the sake of making a few dollars. That we have to stop this and stop the hurt and the pain for our young and our old. Thank you.